It is shortly after 12 noon, and I'm calling you from the bowels of the Bat Cave here at the Rush storage spot. You can see all the Rush
I can.
cases around here. I had a little bit of business to do down here. Not the most
Huh?
comfortable place, but I'm at the Bat Cave.
You'll have to get all that stuff on eBay. You'll make a fortune.
I think they're talking about doing some kind of an auction for charity. So you're not too far off there, Barry.
Oh, okay, okay. So my first question really is Envy of None. It's a fascinating project. I really enjoyed the album. How did that come about, and what is the meaning behind that name?
Um, yeah, thank you for the kind words on that. It actually, it's a overused phrase, Barry, but it came together very organically. Through a variety of circumstances, I ended up meeting Maya Wynn. I
Okay.
was asked to judge an online music contest, which Maya was in the top 10.
Mhm.
And the part of my role on that was to be a music industry expert and give her some advice. So part of her prize was she won some money for recording and gear, and then she got a mentoring call with yours truly. I said, hey, that sounds like a pretty crappy prize, but I'll do it.
Okay.
And during that call, she asked me for some advice about, she had been writing some material that was very much a departure from Envy of None. Left on her own fruition, Maya is very much sort of like a middle of the road, what I would say, Americana country folk artist. So
Mhm.
she had sent me some songs, Barry, and one of them was quite different. And I said, can you tell me about this? Your harmonies and your melodies are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, Long story short, she said she had been collaborating with someone and they had moved away. So I said, well, that's your job. You gotta network. You gotta do what musicians do. Go and meet people. Go be an opening act and connect. And without even breaking a beat, she said, Andy, I looked you up on the internet. Can I write with you? Which I
Mhm.
wasn't expecting, Barry.
Okay.
So anyway, long story short, I said, hey, I've been working on some stuff that is not like Coney Hatch. I'm going to send it to you. It's a little bit electronic. It's kind of ambient. It's kind of vibey, has some 80s, 90s overtones on it. And I sent it off to her. She gravitated towards a song called Shadow that I'd been working on. It was only a 2-minute piece. And she ended up singing some vocals on it and sent it back to me. And I was floored, Barry. I loved it. I subsequently sent that to Alex Lifeson and
Right.
Alf Annabellini. And
Hmm.
they said, Andy, my God, I don't know where you found this girl, but she's very special.
Yeah, yeah.
Talked to Alex about adding some guitars onto Shadow, and same with Alf to add some things on it, and that became the beginnings of Envy of None. We just that one song, Shadow, everybody was knocked out by what she did, and now here we are, fast forward with a full record. But it all
Okay.
started out with Shadow, and everybody being impressed by what Maya brought to that song.
Well, it's certainly an impressive album, and My Win is absolutely remarkable on this record.
Yeah, and the
Um,
name, you had asked about the name.
yeah.
About halfway through working on the project, Barry, I said to Maya, I guess we should come up with a name for this project. And I said, this is going to be tough because you're out in the middle of nowhere and I'm over here. And she said, oh, middle of nowhere. I like that. Let's call it
Yeah.
Middle of Nowhere.
Uh-huh.
So I mentioned it to David Steinberg, David Quinton Steinberg, who actually drummed on the record, but is Alex's attorney. And
Right.
he said, hey, we should do a name search, make sure that nobody else has got it. He goes, let me go on my database. And then he came back and he said, Andy, there's 5 bands out there called Middle of Nowhere. We're going to have to
Right.
find a new name. I said, I don't have a new name. He said, I do. I've got
Hmm.
a name stashed away that I've been holding for a while, and it's called Envy of None.
All
And I
right.
said, wow, that's pretty cool. Where did that come from? And he said, I don't know where I found it. It was a quote from Ovid, a Roman philosopher. And I'm going to send you the quote. And the final line is, and you will be the envy of none.
Okay.
And so I sent it over to Alex, and he said, he's got a great sense of humor. He said, this is
Yeah, yeah.
kind of cool. We're all working in a bubble. And we will be the envy of no one. We will be the envy of none working on this project. And it just stuck, Barry. And we liked it because there's no real connotations. Are we rock? Are we, what are we? That name is very just kind of I don't know, leave it up to your imagination. So that's where the name came from.
Oh, okay. I mean, you talk about working in a bubble. Can I assume then this was a lockdown? I mean, these lockdown albums, it's almost like a subgenre in themselves. I think the McCartney album, that
Yeah.
was a lockdown album. But so is this a lockdown album? And how did you find working under, in those circumstances?
Yes, it is very much a lockdown record. When we started the process, Maya flew to Toronto, and I'm going to say that was probably about 3.5 years ago. And we recorded some bed tracks, some drums. We wanted to go into a real studio with a real drummer, so we did that about 3.5 years ago. Maya came to town, and we got a couple vocals, but the rest of the record was all done from our home studios and sharing files, even right up to the mixing, when we were mixing some tracks virtually in this program called Audio Mover. But
Right.
how did we find it? Very liberating, very rewarding, a very low stress, because at that time, Barry, we had no label, no
Yeah.
management,
Yeah.
no producer, and it was kind of like, for me, most of the ideas started, I would say 60 to 70% of the ideas started with me, and I would share them, but they never left my home until I was happy with it. And then it went off to Alex, and Alex loved the process, because he said there was no producer over his shoulder going, try this, and that's good here. And everybody got a low stress environment to try whatever they wanted. It was extremely liberating and rewarding, I have to tell you. It was stress free. Nobody was watching the clock going, oh my God, we're racking up all kinds of recording costs here. So
Sure.
that part was it was really such a fun process.
Okay. Okay. I
Yep.
mean, you've already touched upon this. You talk about Maya Wynn coming from a kind of a folky Americana background. I always associate you with, perhaps wrongly, with kind of hard rock. Um,
Absolutely.
do you find that this you guys stepping out of these prescribed genres is part of what this makes this record so magic? And did you have a clear idea of the sort of music you wanted to make before the album?
Well, you're absolutely right. Like, Alex and I joked about putting a disclaimer sticker on the front going, this is not Rush or Coney Hatch, warning, because
Okay.
it's quite a departure. But it was a conscious departure. It was an itch that the two of us wanted to scratch.
Mhm.
We have a mutual love, Alex and I, for soundtracks, movie soundtracks, and cinema. We look at people like Trevor Rabin and Danny Elfman and Mark Mothersbaugh, these
Mhm.
successful musicians that have kind of gone on to a second career writing music for film and television, which really has no boundaries stylistically.
Yeah.
So we thought, hey, this might be cool to open up the blinders. Same with Alex, to step outside of the Rush, confines that he was in. And to answer your last question, in terms of stylistically, did we go, okay, let's write one that like sounds like a pop song, like Never Said I Love You, or let's do something that's folky, like Western Sunset? We didn't do that at all. It
Right.
was it was almost like, I've got 6 new ideas that I'm working on. I'm going to send it to everybody, and let's pick our top 3 that we like, and let's start working on them, regardless of genre or sound. And Dumb is a perfect example of that. The song Dumb, I sent it
Okay.
to Alex, and he goes, Andy, what is this? It sounds like a Euro dance track. And I said, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
I said, it's quite rhythmic though, and we could have some fun with it. And he goes, okay, I'm going to open my mind up and I'm going to work on this thing. But the immediate reaction is, whoa, what is that? But all
Sure.
egos were left aside, and we just got over it, and we were working on stuff that got us off, that
Yeah.
excited us.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, weren't Coney Hatch actually signed to the same label as Rush? And is that how you got to meet Alex?
Yes, it was. In the early '80s, around '82, we were signed to Anthem Records,
Mhm.
and so we were label mates with Rush, and we had the
Yeah.
same manager, Ray Daniels, and we occasionally ran into each other on the road. I was a big Rush fan. I grew up in Toronto. We were spoon-fed Rush. They were the biggest band in Toronto. You couldn't avoid it. I think I
Yeah.
bought a Rickenbacker bass because I loved Geddy Lee so much. And I'm dating
Yeah.
myself here, Barry, but I saw Rush at Massey Hall when they recorded All the World's a Stage, their live record, right?
Sure. Sure.
So I grew up a big Rush fan, and then to be signed to the same label, I was like, oh my God, I've arrived now. We're on the same label,
Yeah.
and The early years were very much just sort of what I'd call casual encounters where we met them on the road or we played golf together or tennis. But after I left Coney Hatch, I formed a solo band just under Andy Curran, and we opened up for Rush on the Roll the Bones tour in
Okay.
Canada. So that took it to a next level. The guys met me as the opening act, a nice card and bottle of champagne. Welcome to the tour, Andy, which tells you what kind of guys they are.
Yeah.
But the relationship between Alex and I was really solidified with the 12 to 15 years that I spent working with the guys at Anthem Records as their A&R guy and part of their management team. So we spent a lot of time on the road together and in studios. And then when Rush kind of, after Neil's passing and the band deciding that they weren't going to continue and there was a big pause in the action, that's when the lines were crossed. And Alex asked me if I would play bass on Spy House and Kabul Blues and Western Sunset, which was quite an honor for me to be asked. I jokingly said to him, "Don't you know any other bass players, Alex? You got a guy whose initials are GL on speed dial.
Right.
why don't you call him?" Right? And he said, "No, I've done some guide bass, Andy. I'd love you to replace it for me." So I tried not to cross the line as their company A&R guy, but when that chapter ended, there was this collaboration and discussion about working with Alex, and I was quite I don't know, honored is the best word to say, that he called me out and that he pulled me out of the dugout to ask me to help on the bass duties. And then it grew into envy of none after that.
Sure. I mean, it's great to hear that Rush were treating their support acts so well, because I read a story that when they supported Kiss way back in the 70s, that Kiss treated them very well as well. It's did you hear so many horror stories, as of things not going quite right between bands?
Oh my God, they treated us like with kid gloves. We got sound checks. We got, as I said, champagne in the dressing room. They were quite friendly. Came in and said, "Is everything okay?" They're first class organization. And all the way through the years that I worked with them, people said, "Oh, you work for Rush, don't you?" And I said, "No, they actually treat me like I work with them." They were so respectful, and I can't say enough about those three guys and how kind and generous and humble they were throughout the whole ride.
I mean, you mentioned the track Western Sunset, which is a tribute to Neil Peart. Neil Peart struck me as very intensely private and humble man. I'm just wondering, how you found him?
Neil and and you're absolutely right. I'm very humble, almost shy. People accused Neil of being not that friendly, but he was very much an introvert and a very private guy. And I thought that the Alex's Western Sunset, the composition he wrote for him, was such a great tribute. It was a I don't know. It's
bass on that, by the way.
Thank you. I got to pull out my fretless bass on that, which incidentally Geddy Lee gave me that bass as a present. It was a Jaco Pastoria's fretless jazz bass, and so it came full circle because I'm working with Alex, but I used Geddy's gift, and the song was for Neil. But the sentiment behind that song, Barry, I find is quite appropriate. It's a very gentle, calm tribute to Neil, and he was like that as an individual. He was very well spoken. My God, sometimes I was intimidated meeting him, knowing I have to be on my game here because he's going to expect a quick answer and he's going to want me to have my act together. But I had such a good time working with Neil, and again, just so thankful and appreciative. But as you said, a very private guy. He liked to be in the background, and he was more willing to talk about motorcycles and traveling and hockey. He wasn't that excited about talking about music. It was funny. I do have to tell you, one of my last visits that I had with Neil, when he was still relatively healthy, I went to visit him in California when we knew that he was sick and his illness was terminal. And he said to me, Andy, for the first time, when I'm driving around in my car and I'm listening to Sirius XM or the radio, I'm actually getting to appreciate the music that we created, because I was on this treadmill. It was like record, tour, practice, rehearse. And I never got a chance to step back and listen to our music. And I heard the camera eye the other day come on the radio, and man, I'm really proud of it. And it was interesting, Neil's perspective after he stepped away from it, to
Sure.
appreciate the body of work that he'd created. But my God, what a beautiful guy he was.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story as well. It's nice to hear that. I was interested in Netflix, of course, licensed Liar. Was that the point at which you felt this was really going to go somewhere? And did that prompt you to release that as the first single?
I would say yes on both accounts. When you're working with a tight group of people, and you start to, I like to say, drink your own Kool-Aid. Everybody's like, "Oh, didn't this turn out amazing? We're doing an
Oh,
excellent job." But it's four people just
right.
patting each other's backs, right? And
Yeah.
so that was the first time we kind of let the cat out of the bag from the close group. And when we sent it to a few music supervisors, and they all came back very enthusiastically, and specifically the young woman in Vancouver that
Mhm.
said, "I want to license this for the Netflix series," that was kind of a nice endorsement and a shot in the arm that maybe we were doing something right. That kind of fueled us to go, let's finish this, because we were at about the 6 song marker.
Right.
And when we were having discussions about what track to lead off with, I said, "Well, what about Liar? It's kind of immediate, and our friends over at Netflix, and they seem to like it. So maybe this is a good one to come out of the gates kicking a little bit." And that song gets your attention right out of the gate. So
Absolutely.
we thought it was a pretty good one to start.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, my favorite track on this album is a track called "Look Inside." It's like a blend of the Grateful Dead's Oxymoxoa and Depeche Mode. It's wonderful, and then you get these backward guitar sound as well. It's very Hendrix-esque
Yes.
backward guitar sound on it. It's really a real trippy vibe. It's. I wonder if you could talk about that one. Great video as well to that song, by the way. Great
Yeah.
video.
Well, thank you for saying that. It is one of my favorites too, maybe selfishly because the bass really, the bass kind of sets the tone for that, and is a little bit unconventional on how I recorded it. I did a stereo track. I doubled my bass. I distorted it. I put it left, right. I treated it almost like a guitar, and spanned it out, and it really takes up a lot of space. But I have to be honest with you, Barry, when I wrote that little piece, I fueled myself with a nice bottle of red wine in my studio, and I was
Yeah.
pouring ample glasses, and I found this groove that was very hypnotic, and it's kind of, slow and moody and Pink Floydish. And we call it our stoner lullaby, because Maya's, we thought it was a really good, I don't know, just a really nice stroke of all these different sounds and everything. And then when the label said, "Hey, what do you think about releasing this?" We were like, "Wow, that's kind of bold.
Yeah.
This isn't what I would call a conventional track." But and the video with Maya in it, we thought that, hey, this girl's pretty much unknown. Why don't we feature her in the video? And so she was game for it, and we just wanted it to be a very trippy ride, like you said, and it is one of my favorite tracks on the record for sure.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. I love all that sort of trippy music. Throughout the summer, I always go back to 1967. I start listening to Country Joe and the Fish and all that sort of stuff. It's just wonderful. But that's
Yeah.
that's the track that really got my attention. Anyway.
Well, you mentioned Alex's guitarist too, and throughout the record, Barry, he told me that his relationship with Maya, and spinning his guitar tracks and dancing with her, he literally used those words. He said, "I danced with her vocals the whole time around," and there were songs where he said, "I'm not going to put a guitar track down until I hear her guide vocal, because I want this interplay." And you're right, on Look Inside, you can hear them swirling around her vocal track, and very soundscapey and non-traditional guitar sounds. But it was a dance with this vocal thing the whole way through.
Absolutely. I mean, the guitar work is very ambient and cinematic, very understated. It reminds me of some of the 80s period Rush, where his guitar wasn't so much to the fore, but it's a wonderful blend. It really is. This music is a strange juxtaposition between the dreamy ethereal quality of Maya's voice, and the more gritty thematically, I think, some of the lyrics and songs.
Yeah.
To what extent, I think, did you all affect the writing of this music? Were there other kind of interesting areas that you were explored individually, or?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you said that juxtaposition because when we were about halfway through the record, we sent Maya the song "Enemy," and
Okay.
she called us all back and said, you know, I don't know if this is going to work because I feel like I should yell. I feel like I should be really forceful in this. And you having listened to the record, you know that that's not really her style. She's the lovely icing on the cake, and it's evocative and moody
Right.
and wispy at times and whimsical. And I said to Maya, um, you know, I'm going to put on my producer hat here, and I don't think you have to push your vocals at all. Just you, be who you are, because there's enough nastiness going on around you. We've got
Right.
that big Alex flexes his muscle in Enemy, and there's big power chords and some
Yeah.
nasty fuzzy bass throughout the, you know, and industrial loops. And so
Sure.
I said the marriage of your beautiful, soft, wispy voice with what the chaos we're creating behind you is what's going to make Envy of None special. So, you know, we found that that marriage between what she was doing was what kind of set the tone for it. And really, in the writing terms of it, as a lyricist and vocalist with Coney Hatch, I would seed her with ideas, but very small ideas. I said, I have a chorus idea or maybe a little lyrical theme line that I'm going to send you. And if you like it, please use it. But if you
Mhm.
don't bother. And I said, I don't want you to feel like a robot. I don't want to write the lyrics and go, here, sing it. I said, it's important for you to have your voice, for your message to be clear. And we gave her the full runway on it. And it was interesting how some of that turned out because Liar, the lyrics that I sent her were very much about, you know, nobody likes a liar. And
Sure.
it was more about a relationship, you know, you lied to me. And she ended up getting called on jury duty. And she was sitting in this jury duty and went, oh, okay, this woman that's on trial is a liar. And that fueled these very, you know, almost aggressive lyrics that you're talking about. The message is quite poignant. Same with Enemy.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
fast forward to what's going on in the Ukraine, we've been talking about how this is exactly what we were writing about on that one. It wasn't a political statement at the time, but my
Mhm.
God, it's quite appropriate now to what's happening there. And we're about to announce something, Barry, where we're going to use that song to try to raise some extra money for some of the refugees with Ukraine. So we're going to try to do our little part to help out what's happening in that part of the world. But again, those lyrics, as you said, very, very pointy, the message is clear, you know, it's a piece, it's a cry for peace, that song.
I mean, I love the keyboards, the keyboard work on this album. Who actually plays keyboards on this record?
You know, all of us did. There's that. It's funny that you mentioned some of these retro bands because I've got a beautiful synth library at home, and Mellotron is one of my favorites. The Moody Blues
Oh,
used it, Pink Floyd used it, right?
Mellotron
So
is anything with Mellotron, and it just sounds fantastic. I mean, what would
yeah,
Strawberry Fields be like without that Mellotron? It's but
right.
there were really tricky instruments. Apparently, they kept going wrong.
Yeah, and they're very tricky, but what's happened with technology is they've been sampled and the sounds are
Ah,
quite close. So I don't own personally a new Mellotron, but the old ones, as you said, are super temperamental.
they were.
Same with all of the old Moog synthesizers. You have to plug them in and let them warm up for an hour, and they can get really pitchy as you're playing them. They'll just go out of tune. But I worked with IK Multimedia, and they have a really robust library called Sample Tank, and they have Mellotrons in there. So, you know, look inside. I played all the Mellotrons on that, and Alfio played some keyboards on some stuff, and so did Alex as well, a few little keyboard pads. But the keyboard pads and the keyboard bass, like I put my electric bass down for a bunch of tracks, um, and I played keyboard bass, which is why I think people say, hey, you know, some of this stuff sounds a little Depeche Mode-ish or, you know, The Cure or something. So there's these sounds that I think, Barry, take you back to the late 80s or mid 80s and 90s where you go, something familiar about this. Well, it's the
Yeah.
keyboard sounds, right?
But yeah, I mean the keyboard's absolutely fab. I mean, if you love Mellotron, I mean some of the King Crimson albums
Oh
just
my
sound
God.
absolutely remarkable, remarkable.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you actually, I couldn't resist it. I mean, you supported Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, sorry, back in the day, Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, all those sort of bands. I
Yes.
was wondering if you have any interesting stories or anecdotes from that time.
Oh my God. Well, yes, I do, and I was
Without
quite
getting
young.
yourself sued, of course.
Yeah, no, no, we'll keep it PG. But
Uh,
I have to tell you that at the root of this guy that you're talking to right now is a music fan. Those
mm,
bands that you listed, I had posters of them on my wall as a
sure,
16-year-old,
sure.
like when we got to play with Peter Frampton and Edgar Winter, I was like, my mind was blown. But you think about the Judas Priest Screaming for Vengeance tour and the Iron Maiden Peace of Mind tour, those two tours might be the pinnacle of when those bands like peaked and really hit their stride, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when we were, and at that time I might have been 19 or 20, and when we opened up for Judas Priest, Rob Halford came into our dressing room on gig number one,
Right.
knocked on the door, and said, "Where's the Coney Hatches? Where are all the Coney Hatches? I want to introduce myself." And he came in and shook our hands and said, "Lovely to have you on the tour." And he said, "I'm going to warn you. I need to warn you guys about something." And this is gig number one. We hadn't
Right.
played a single note with him. He said, "Our fans are going to hate you. They are absolutely going to hate you, not because of the music that you play, because they don't want an opening act.
Yeah.
They're going to throw crap at you. They're going to be abusive. They're going to be this and that. And I'm going to give you some advice for the first three songs. Put your head down and plow and just stay on for the first three songs, because if you can last three songs without being
Yeah.
pelted off, then they're going to go, okay, these guys are good." And he was spot on. There were
Right.
kids in the front row flipping us the bird. They threw tennis balls at us. They threw cutlery, M1 firecrackers at us. I can remember playing it, and this, firecracker went off. This was before you got searched going into venues, right? And I
Right.
felt this heat rush, and we got hit by tennis balls and cups and everything. And then after the third song, it was like, okay, I guess they're not afraid of us. So the
Right.
Judas Priest tour was a rude awakening for us.
Mm.
The guys in Iron Maiden that were closer to our age, and we hit it off with them famously. I brought my tennis racket out on the road and played tennis with Steve Harris on days off, and he's super competitive soccer player. I think at one point was on a farm team to be a professional soccer player, so he did not like losing tennis games. And we ended up striking up a friendship which has lasted to this day. Steve and I are best friends, and that started in 1983, right?
Right.
When we were out with Crocus, they weren't very kind to us. They couldn't Crocus and accept, other than Udo Dirk Schneider. He was quite friendly, but there were some bands that weren't very nice to us at all. But there
Yeah.
was others like Priest and Maiden. Peter Frampton was very kind to us, came in and introduced himself. Edgar Winter, same thing. Ted Nugent somebody had punched him in the eye the
Yeah.
night before, and he showed up with a big black eye. And I was like, how did that happen? He said, a hunting accident.
But it's funny, you say some bands not. I mean, the band I've heard most negative stories about in terms of band supporting is Aerosmith. I mean, Kiss and Kansas. Most of the Aerosmith made them feel fairly unwelcome when they were on the tour. So it's always interesting to just go either way, really.
Well, Barry, it's funny you mentioned that, because through the years, you meet all of these different bands, and Cheap Trick were another one. One of my favorites. The guys
Yeah.
are so cool, and Robin Zander, arguably one of the best vocalists in the world, but got to be very good friends with those guys. But one of our road crew guys ended up working with Kiss, and Kiss were on
Oh,
tour
okay.
with Aerosmith. And he knew that I was a huge Aerosmith fan. So he said, "Andy, would you like to come to the show?" And so he got me tickets and backstage passes. And and he said, "By the way, one of the guys on Aerosmith's road crew is a big Coney Hatch fan. He wants to meet you. He loves you." I said, "Really?" So
Yeah.
I met Joe Perry's guitar tech, and he said, "Come up
Okay.
on stage and here's what Joe recorded, Toys in the Attic with, and here's the guitar he played with the solo on Walk This Way." He was very nice to me. And so at the end of that, I said, "Guys, is there any chance I might be able to get to meet Steven Tyler?" And
Yeah.
they said, "Do yourself a favor. Sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes." And to me, that was a warning, like, you're not going to like this, right? So I said, okay, I don't want to meet him. I just want to remember the guy that I love as the lead vocalist. And they warned me ahead of time, you're not going to be happy with meeting him. So I decided not to meet him that day, Barry.
Sure. Your self-titled debut album from 1990, I believe, you got the Juno Award for Most Promising Male Vocalist. Do you prefer to be a solo artist, or do you prefer the sort of politics of actually being in a band?
I'm much more comfortable in a band environment, and I actually had arguments with the label who wanted to call that record Andy Curran, and I was like, absolutely not. I'm from a big family. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and I'm a big team sport guy. I love hockey. Yeah. I always feel that there's strength in numbers. So I have to admit, Barry, I was a little uncomfortable with my mug on the front cover and everybody saying this is Andy's solo band, because I had members of the band that wrote with me on that. And I quickly changed it, that record, after the next band was called Soho. And then I did Caramel and Leisure World. I feel much more comfortable in a band situation. I don't like, look at me, look at my face. I don't like that stuff.
Okay. I mean, and sorry, go on. You're going to say something.
I'm just a little self-conscious about it. I don't, I get it. Why they did it, but the label was adamant. They said, nope, your name's going on the record, your face is going on the front cover, and that's end of the conversation. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Talking about songwriting, really, I was reading a biography of Brian Wilson, and it surprised me. He said that writing God Only Knows is probably one of the greatest songs ever. He says it came to him so easily. He said he describes it as like melted butter, really. I'm just wondering, how do you find songwriting? Do you find it's something that is you really have to labor at, or does it come quite easily for you?
There's these lightning strikes moment where I'll hear something in my head and I immediately, will pick up my iPhone and just sing into it just so I don't forget it. And so some of that stuff I think is a little bit divine intervention, like an idea will pop out. I don't know where it comes from, and I'll quickly go into the studio and get it down. So that part I find is a gift, and I'm thankful for it. I don't know where it comes to these melodies.
Maybe in Brian Wilson's case, it's kind of acid intervention, I suspect.
Yes, right. Or as we said in Look Inside, infused by a half a bottle of wine, right? That inspired me to do it. But I do labor and toil over the lyrics and the melodies, because I 95% of the time I will write the music first. And then, like a puzzle, I'll go, okay, I've got this here. What am I going to put on top of it? So that can be challenging. There are times when it comes quick, but for the most part with me, Barry, it's a bit labor intensive to come up with the melodies and the lyrics, and some of my lyrics in the early Coney Hatch are quite juvenile, and I look back at them and go, wow, I'm not going to win any Pulitzer Prize for this set of lyrics here, right? So I've spent a little bit more time on lyrics. Speaking of Steven Tyler said to me, the average rock fan does not give a tinker's cuss about what you're singing about. If it sounds good coming off your tongue and is rhythmic and the cadence of it. So I try to find a balance between that. And I always remembered when Steven Tyler said that. So sometimes my lyrics are gibberish, but they just come out sounding okay. Great. Yeah. So I try to buffer it and not get too serious. I rarely write political stuff. It's usually autobiographical or something that has happened to me. There's enough inspiration waking up every day when crazy stuff happens where I'm like, oh, I'm going to write a song about that.
Sure, absolutely. The last question that I always ask people really is, name the one song out there that you'd wish you'd written.
Oh my God, that's a great question. Well, I'm gonna, if I can be so bold as to ask for 2, I'm gonna ask for 2. Okay,
go on.
Because one of the songs that resonated with me, and then when I subsequently went to see Edgar Winter, the Edgar Winter Group, play live, was Frankenstein. So I bought the 45, and I remember when I bought it, Barry, just going, this is crazy. This is an instrumental rock song, and it's on AM radio. I'm hearing it on my sister's transistor radio, and I just loved the Neanderthal vibe of that riff that was so almost like a Smoke on the Water. You can't forget that earworm with the dan dan bam 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 bam, and I was
Right.
like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? So when I went to see them live, it was at that moment, and there was a mirror ball and smoke, and everybody's smoking dope around me, and I was like young, and I was like, oh my God, I want to be in a band. I want to be in a band. And that the Edgar Winter Group and Frankenstein probably was a pivotal moment for me. But when I think about a record or a song, I think about Tom Petty. I think
Okay.
about Into the Great Wide Open or Free Falling. That record, that whole record, I cannot believe the quality and how great those songs are. So if there's any song that I wish I wrote, it would have been any of the ones from that record.
I'm so proud to
Full
have.
Moon Fever, I think it is the record called Full Moon Fever, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I was so glad to catch Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. The last gig they played in the UK, it was
Yeah.
He passed away about 3 months later, but it was a wonderful gig and a wonderful catalogue of songs as well.
Yeah, I know. And the simplicity of them, yet the
Yeah.
fact that they're just so, and that video of with that Johnny Depp was in, about
Yeah.
he got a tattoo out there, like some of his lyrics are just so, I don't know, they're so tongue in cheek too, but I think he's a wonderful songwriter and quite envious of him.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thank you so much for doing this interview. I hope the album does really well. I'm sure it will. And best of luck with it.
Barry, thank you so much for your time and appreciate the kind words, and fingers crossed we're enjoying the ride, and hopefully everybody likes the record as much as we enjoyed making it. So we'll see how it goes. But Barry, thank you for your time, buddy.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.